very good evening, all of you. IDG family is elated to welcome you all to its 117th session. It is indeed an honor and privilege to have with us a legal luminary who has pioneered new paradigms in Indian law organization and management structures. I extend my warm welcome to Mr. Jyoti Sagar, sir, Chairman and founder of J. Sagar Associates. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time from your personal and professional commitments and gracing us with your presence. The topic for today's session is competencies and skilling for the practice of law. And the moderator for today's session is Mr. Tanish Arora, one of the co conveners of IDG. I humbly request Shreya to introduce the guest for all the attendees.
Thank you, Aditi. And hello, everyone. Hello, sir. I know that we all who are present here are very excited to hear from Mr. Jyoti Sagar sir himself today. However, firstly, to begin with his introduction, sir has been practicing law since 1976. He founded J. Sagar Associates, JSA as we all know, in New Delhi in 1991 as a solo practitioner. He has also founded KNS Partners, an IP boutique firm, in 1994. Sir has done his BA Economics Honours from St. Stephen's College, Delhi in 1972 and LLB from University of Delhi in 1975. Over the years, he has received many accolades and recognitions, and he speaks regularly at international and national conferences and workshops on topics ranging from corporate IP to infrastructure projects, economy, and many more. Sir is also the Associate President at Society of Indian Law Firms and he currently serves as one of the International Vice Presidents of Asian Patents Attorneys Association. Sir is also a member of American Bar Association, Delhi High Court Bar Association, International Trademark Association, and Supreme Court Bar Association. He's also the chairman of Society for Urban Regeneration and is trustee of Genesis Foundation, to note, which provides critical medical assistance to underprivileged children. Sir also serves as on the board of governors at Scindia Law School in Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh. I would now extend my humble gratitude to Sir for giving us this opportunity to hear from him today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir. We can now begin the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shreya. In order to make the most of this session, I sincerely request all the audience to keep their microphones on mute and post their questions to Sir through the chat box only. Now, without keeping the attendees from waiting any further, I graciously invite Sir to address the attendees. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for that very laudatory introduction. I'm delighted to be here with all of you today to talk about something which has been of personally of interest to me for many years. And without much ado, I would like to sort of jump straight into the subject that we have today, and that is really in a way the competencies and skills that you require for practice of law. And also, I like to talk a little bit about, in a way, the gap that exists between the curriculum that you have in the law schools and the competencies and skills that you require for practice of law. So, a law course is a professional course, and its objective has to be, I guess, to produce professionals. And you also know that there is a difference between knowledge of substantive laws and the technicalities of that law on the one hand, and on the other hand, having the skills to use that knowledge to solve legal problems of your clients that you eventually represent. So, we in the profession have often complained that it's not only here in India, it's a global phenomenon, and we say, well, law graduates are not practice ready. And the question then sort of arises, well, what does practice ready actually mean? Now, over the years, there has been, a lot that's been written about how the law school curriculums need to change it, a bit to accommodate some of these, at least seeding of some of the skills and competencies that you require, for actual practice of law. There have been not so much work. Unfortunately, the Bar Council of India has not done much work on it. And I'm actually quite appalled that for almost now 50 years, there hasn't been any significant change in terms of how we actually train and teach young people to become legal professionals. Way back in 2010, there was a report which was produced for, it was called, reform of legal education in India, and they had a proposed directions for reform with including the first 2 years curriculum was posted on the Bar Council website for comments. And believe it or not, that still is on the website of the Bar Council, and that's where it sits, and nothing happened thereafter. So, from a practical perspective, I mean, as you know, as someone who has been practicing law for 45 years and involved with the setting up and managing, law firms, uh, clearly, what is needed uh, for a young person to be a good lawyer. One sort of has had an idea about that for some years, but I actually did a very interesting experiment, and that was this experiment was roughly a couple of years ago. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, clearly.
You can hear me. Okay. So this was a couple of years ago, and I got a group of about 14 youngsters from the firm, and these were people with kind of literally zero post qualification experience to about 2 years, and we went through a very interesting exercise. So I said to them, I said, what I want you to do is to just sit back and think that as you were actually doing your daily practice of law, you walk into the office, you sit on your desk, and you start your work, and suddenly something comes up, uh, and you kind of just sit back and you say, "Oh, I wish I had learned this in the law school." So we actually called this thing, "I wish I had learned this in the law school moments." And we ended up with a very kind of an interesting list of things which people came up with. For example, a young colleague said that, oh, a couple of days back, there was this problem, and I had this client at the other end of the phone, and she was just yelling at me. And I had just no idea how to deal with the situation. And then another sort of colleague said, well, I had a real difficult situation, a couple of months back because I was doing a time-bound thing which the senior associate had asked me to complete, and then I got called in by the partner who then says, "Do this just now." And this young colleague says, "Well, I really had just no idea how to handle this, what to do. How do I sort of deal when I'm between a rock and a hard place? And here I have to now do two things, and I just didn't know what to say and what to do." So so these kinds of experiences from these youngsters actually led to thinking about this, and putting together some thoughts as to say, what is it? What are those key things which really are needed for practice of law? And in a sense that I speak more as a corporate lawyer, because I have not done so much of contentious work, in my regular practice, at least since not 1980. So that's a good 41 years. But so I mean, I looked at it from the lens of a corporate lawyer. But what I'm going to talk to you about in terms of what I find are the critical competencies and skills that you need beyond the technical knowledge of law, because technical knowledge of law I kind of is given. So, in a way, I maybe was speaking more from a corporate lawyer's perspective, but most of these also will apply, I think, with fairly equal force, even for a person who's going to go into contentious practice or into litigation. And when I talk about corporate law, I mean, I'm talking really also of people who are going to practice law in a law firm environment or be in-house. These things kind of clearly are relevant for all those. So just let's look at this, some of the things, and I would just kind of, in a very quickly, because I do know that I have, maybe about 25 minutes overall, and I like it to be more interactive. So let's me just simply kind of enumerate and maybe talk, a bit about each one of these so-called, competencies. So what I have sort of thought about doing it actually is basically into three baskets. So there's a basket what I call of professional skills. Then I would talk a bit about what I call the behavioral competencies, and then I want to talk a little bit about really about the values of the profession that are very very relevant when we talk of when we talk of lawyering and we talk of what makes a great attorney, what makes a great lawyer. So these are the three baskets. The professional skills one, of course, is the largest of those baskets for obvious reasons. And I have kind of identified, I would say, six competencies here that I think are relevant. So the very first one I would say is communication skills, and that's sort of verbal, written, and even to some extent, non-verbal. And the importance and relevance of that is obviously would be understandable to most of you immediately. If you just think of it, a lawyer spends a very substantial part of her working time in communicating. So that can be, one-to-one meetings. It can be in a court. It can be over phone. It can be correspondence, emails, notices, letters, and documents, and of course, pleadings, negotiations, brief, contract writing. So if you look at that, we spent a lot of our time in communication. And I mean, I would say that practice of law is about practice of words. I mean, we are basically wordsmiths. The output of our work is generally written or verbal, and 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 the more effectively you can communicate, because even writing a contract is communication, the better lawyer you would be. Now, I mean, one of the problem areas that, of course, we have is that the communication skills per se, I understand, is really not. It's a very important skill, but unfortunately, it's not a credit program in most of the law schools in India. And also, the law schools, frankly, do not teach, I would say, writing skills, including writing skills as a credits program. And I do know that conveyancing has been traditionally a part of the of traditional law program, but that really truly is not something which teaches you drafting skills or writing skills. So, and I keep on saying that, and come to think of it, and I'm going to encourage you to do something, and that is, please do read some textbook on legal writing skills. Normally, I mean, I have spoken to a room full of lawyers, and they are unable to name a single book or a single leading author, the name of any single leading author on legal on legal writing. And the problem is that, therefore, we as lawyers basically do not learn the language on the as part of our legal training, but we just pick it up. So what has happened is that over the years and years and years and centuries, the so-called legal now of the language of the law, the legalese, has passed from generation to generation without much questioning, and therefore we have a complex legal language that we use. We in this day and age, when laws concern everybody, a common person on the street who needs to know her legal rights and her duties, or a person who's buying a refrigerator and wants to understand the warranty. So a language of the law is very, very complicated. And I'm urging everyone, and I urge young people most of all, that don't let the old style, don't let the old vocabulary pollute your mind. Write and try and use plain English as part of your skilling. So I would say that you know whether it's writing skills or verbal communications. I mean, verbal communication, one of the most important skills actually is art of listening. Of course, there's presentation and public speaking skills, and also body language. Believe it or not, that's also very, very important. So I will put this aside for a moment just now. We'll go deeper into some other questions. If you want to talk a little bit about plain English and you want to talk about that, I'll be very happy to do that. Now, so I would say that the and there is a very important reason why I'm talking about communication skills as being an important one, because it links in very, very strongly with another skill that I'm going to talk about, and that's really, both your emotional intelligence and your emotional quotient, because these two things have a big interplay. uh, the second skill on the practice side that I want to talk about is negotiation skills. And I'm again wearing the hat of a corporate lawyer to say that negotiation skills are very, very important. And I would just also add a caveat, so that you see it in that light. And the caveat is that I think it will be unfair for the profession to expect that students coming out of law schools are completely practice ready, because the profession owes a duty to the younger members of the bar to impart knowledge, to impart practical knowledge. And many of these things that I'm going to talk about, in some parts, they some of those things can actually be really, really learned when you are actually practicing, learned, on the job, and where we as the senior members of the bar have the obligation to teach youngsters. But I'm pointing these things out so you keep them in mind, and whenever you have opportunities of even seeding some of this understanding and knowledge and start learning some of these things, so you can actually have, if you have any opportunity of learning any of that, you can keep that in your mind. So negotiation skill is another one, because negotiating on behalf of your clients, or for even counseling a client who is in negotiations, is a very key task. And even to some extent, even for litigating lawyers, negotiations in a very subtle sense is part of even part of your proceedings uh, before a court or any other adjudicator. So I always, I wonder, I wish that, negotiations, which I think in some law schools at one point had been introduced. I don't know what the case in your situation is, that if it's a part of a curriculum as a credits program. But I do believe that, if we can have, if you can have moot courts as, part of your daily, activities that you do, why not mock negotiations? So I don't know if there are programs, because I believe some colleges at one time and law schools had introduced this. So I don't know if that's the case. But if it isn't, then I think you need to maybe, I don't know if you have any faculty members here, but that's one of the interesting things that you need to think about. And I'm mindful that some of the things that I'm talking about, practice skills, that you may not have faculty which is equipped with that, and that's where the role of the profession comes. That even whilst, how do we engage with the academia, how do we engage with law schools to impart some of these things as visiting faculty, and so on. So negotiation skills, very, very important. The third thing is, I call it practice management skills, because it's about learning some tips and techniques of daily work that a lawyer must undertake. So here again, uh, uh, in a sense, when we talk of management in a practice context, which means sort of accomplish some tasks which are, how you can accomplish tasks efficiently, accurately, and effectively. So, so let's see in practical terms, what do we mean? So one of the things that I struggled with, and I see, a lot of us professionals struggle with, is actually learning the time management skills. Because as you know, for us lawyers, the real piece of inventory that we have, apart from our brains that we use and the knowledge that we use, our real inventory is time. And time, as we all know, is a very perishable commodity. So the how you actually undertake time management, and whether and as you grow in the profession, then there is it's just so many calls on your time. You have to practice law, service your clients, you need time for your family, you need time for social engagements, and then you have commitments for yourself. I mean, personal, hobbies, and so on and so forth. And what I have found is that I have, sometimes I feel like calling it not time management but stress management, because we get into so much of stress when we have outstandings that we have to complete, and we get lost on how to prioritize things, and what to do, what and when. So I think in this sense, it's a very critical skill. So time management is a critical skill, and you can actually, it's a much research subject. So it's not that you have enough authoritative. There are textbooks, there are structured modules, there are plenty of coaches and online coaching that's available, self-help guides, and so on. So I recommend people to spend some time thinking about time management, picking up some tips and techniques, and start using them, so that you are efficient with your time, because that's a very important part of your inventory, and it's perishable. It dies, as you know. The other part is uh, computing skills is important, and so it's important to cover the basic. And I'm not making a pitch for Microsoft Office or anything, but I think the critical things like word processing, and bit of PowerPoint presentation, and Excel to some extent, because I will mention this because uh, certainly for business lawyers and corporate lawyers, some idea of financial matters, and so on is very important. For example, a simple thing like how do you read a balance sheet, and so on. So Excel is interesting because it's a very as you know, it's a very useful piece of software, and you can use it for different things. But it's good to have that knowledge. So it's uh, you also have other there are standard packages that you have on tools that how to use some of these Word and Microsoft Outlook and other things in a better way. So try and equip yourself with those things; they will come in very handy. Another thing that you can learn about a little bit, and it will hold you in good stead, will be a bit of project management. Because you today do your writing projects, or you have your research projects, and believe it or not, when you're working on a large project as a part of a team, working on a big project in a in sort of as a member of a team, the law firm, uh, project management skills are are very good. Another interesting thing also that I find is, and that's a learning as a part. I call it as part of law practice management, is orientation for detail. So try and focus on detail. So and as they say, devil is in the detail. That's absolutely true. And your image and your reputation depends a lot on what you do in detail, and it also demonstrates very strong work ethic when you do a little things, whether it is spell checks, or whether it is any other thing that you do, checking the numbers and the math, and so on and so forth. So just developing the detail orientation is very, very important. Then, of course, is the classic thing. That's what we lawyers are there to solve problems. So identifying and solving problems. I mean, it is, of course, you learn it. There are processes and methods that you can apply, whereby you actually, uh, uh, you know, actually you can, which help you to identify a problem. And I have always felt that if you have identified a problem correctly, literally you found half the answer, you found half the of the solution. And I mean, because we apply, so in terms of solving problem, really is applying learning, you know to solving a complex problem that a client may have. And just the process of that. So you start by saying, okay, uh, you understand the context and the setting of a client's situation, because that's the only way you can give legal advice. And that means that when you're dealing with a matter, you need to have some basic business knowledge, the basic business concepts, basic knowledge of how business processes are done. uh, you need to know when you're solving a problem, client's business and the industry. So if you get accustomed to reading some business press, understanding about different industries and different businesses, it's a very useful thing to inculcate and start learning. The other thing that you see is, and you will find that when you actually get into when you get into the practice of law itself, that understanding relationships and understanding parties' motivations is very important when you are actually going to solve a problem and suggest a solution to a client. Some of these things become very, very important. Then, diagnosing the problem. And obviously, I have found that talking to the clients and, interviewing a client in a very business context, and that's where your communication skills come in, is a very, very interesting thing, because listening to the client helps you understand the problem. Asking the right questions to the client brings out the issues on the surface. And uh, and then you go ahead, and you are then able to actually, sometimes client doesn't understand the situation, but you actually start digging deeper with a very good interview with the client, and suddenly the real problems start emerging. So the whole context of communicating, understanding, and culling out information becomes very important. And of course, for those who are in litigation, that can be a very, very important strength when you are cross-examining witnesses. And then again, as lawyers, we say, okay, solutions. You look at solutions and strategies. So you live the if you are going to draft a contract, you actually live that contract. You say, okay, what will happen? You start from how the order will be placed, and how the goods will be manufactured, and how they are supplied, and what happens when there's a defect. So you actually start developing these techniques of saying, I'm going to live the contract. We then also say that one of the big things that you do in solutions and strategies is also follow a simple. And I used to say, I actually had a mentor who taught me this, and he used to have this printed in very large letters. He had these four words that there was on the back, and which said which said, assume nothing, and the next said, show me. So in terms of us as lawyers, when you go into the matters of the detail, so we said we assume nothing. So if the client is giving you some facts, you got to make sure that you see that that's what the correspondence which has been handed over to you, that it actually suggests that. And if a client is making a statement to say, this is what happened, and you're going to say, that's fine, but show me. And I still remember that if I would tell my senior that this is what this passage in this and this case it said, and he would say, okay, young man, go and bring that book and show that paragraph to me. So this idea of assume nothing and show me really stands you in very good, very good stead. And the fifth competence on this side is, I would say that legal and factual assessment. This really means ability, then, because that's part of your problem solving as well, is your ability to articulate the significant legal issues, which are involved. And thereby, and then you sort of start assessing what are the options. And there is very interesting, your knowledge of the laws, and not only that. I mean, the broader your repertoire of knowledge of laws that you know, the better you will be able to look at a matter from a more of a 35,000 feet or 85,000 piece space. And as you go in, you will find that apart from just mere knowledge of law, in some of the industries, for instance, in financial, you actually have a regulation which plays even a greater or a bigger role. So, ability to identify the correct regulatory framework, and out of that, then you actually is where you are actually able to have interdisciplinary discussions, because you may need to discuss something with the auditors, you may need to discuss something with a technical team if it's a power purchase agreement, for example, and then you are able to articulate the options that the client has based on your knowledge, based on what you've learned, and then you are able to suggest the options, and the pros and cons and what's good, assess the risks, and assess, for the client to assess. So because we are kind of trained to do risk and assess risks in a different way. Business people to assess risks in a business in a slightly different way, because at times they are able to take business calls to say, okay, just tell me what this means if I did this, the other, and you are then not going to articulate to say, well, these are the potential consequences, and then the client can take a call which way the client would like to go. So the process of identifying legal problems, and then applying your legal research and your factual checks that you've done, applying that to that entire case which is before you, then coming up with the solutions with pros and cons and risks and risk assessment, and then helping the client in taking the decision that the client wants to take. And of course, it is the client's decision in the end. I mean, we lawyers don't step into the shoes of the client. The client eventually takes the decision, because the consequences is something which the client will have to face. So that, in a way, is a very pure part of in a way, the hard part of what we do. Now, another attendant thing is research skill, and these days, actually, the research skill has a different problem. And the different problem is that when when I started practice of law, because I went through a rather interesting course of legal studies myself, because I joined a law firm uh, 10 days after I had finished my undergrad uh, uh, course, and I joined a law firm and I interned during the day. So I used to attend the office from 9:30 to 5:30, and then from quarter past 6 to quarter past 9, I went to night school for my law. So for 3 years, whilst I worked full day, and then I went for my classes. So I was able to sort of have a very good view of actual application as to the law, the way we studied and how it got applied on a daytime, on a day-to-day basis. And those days, and I'm now taking you back. Yes, I am that old. uh, 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 1st June 7th 2022 will be 50 years since I joined that law firm and started my study of law. At that time, research used to be very different from what it is today. We didn't have anything. We just simply had books. We had every 10 years the AIR manual was published, which would summarize the law that had developed over the past 10 years. So, and that came every, so you had a publication of AIR manual of 1951, 1961, 1971, and then the next one will come in 1981. And now, believe it or not, people who maintained cards. They would made like you have in the old libraries. You used to have those index cards. So you had index cards on different areas of law. So when the All India reporter turned up, so we youngsters had to sit down and pick out the cases that interested the firm, and then we wrote those cards. And the lawyer who had the best system, had the best access to knowledge, had therefore the best library, had the who had the best books, the best library, the best access to current knowledge. It made a heck of a competitive difference. We didn't have any of what is available today. There was no internet, there was no Google. In fact, there was no fax. When I started practice, joined the law firm, there were no photocopiers. There were no electronic typewriters. We used to have manual typewriters, and we used to have cyclostyling machines on which we would cut stencils, and we would, print these 13 copies which went to the Supreme Court if you had to file, and all that had to be done manually. There were no photocopiers, so when we had appeals to be filed in the Supreme Court, believe it or not, the entire lower court's record would be typed up all over again, cyclostyled, and then bundled, and 13 copies prepared. Okay, from there, to the thing where we today are, with emails and Google and Manupatra and all the Westlaw and the huge amount of databases that are available. So today, our time, the problem was, uh, you really had to work very hard, and sometimes you physically look through 10 years of AIR manual just hoping that you will find a case. And I've had personal experiences of finding cases, which were not in the manual because the manual was still to come, and you looked at all the 26 volumes of AIRs and went through every page and say, ah, my God, this is the case that applies to me. So from there to where we are. So problem today is of plenty. So these days, the issue with research is that you need to figure out what's relevant and where to find it, because you have so much. So you have to have that skill of finding out where is it the relevant materials. How do I cull out the relevant materials, and then you know I mean, again, the interesting part here is that the materials are so many, so you have to be very aware of what is relevant, and you have to be then clear about what are the methods that you will use for accessing that relevant material. So it's that's a very very important thing for as a skill for a lawyer to practice law. Now, I'm coming to the two more important things, which are really, and I call them, these are sort of what I'm going to talk about actually are two soft skills in a way. But from my understanding of the last so many years that I've been in the profession, these are the hard ones. The soft skills always are the hardest ones. And I would say that from the behavioral side, there are two things that I'd like to talk to you about today. And one is really, in a very broad sense, understanding and developing emotional intelligence. So, today, the research shows that apart from pure technical skills that all of us and cognitive abilities, analytical reasoning, and all of those things that we have, there is a category of competencies or abilities, which is very very distinct and leads to very very specific distinctive performance. And that's emotional intelligence. Now, interesting thing is that actually research now shows that emotional intelligence can be developed, and it actually is is a key differentiator, I think. And certainly I would say in the corporate sphere, whether you are in a law firm or whether you are in house, this is a very very important aspect. So as there are uh, you may I don't know if any one of you have read, but David Goldman is the guy who did most of the original work on emotional intelligence. And it's from his perspective and his definition, it are sort of basically five skills. The three of them are sort of concerning the self management, and the last two concern your person's interactions and managing relationships with others. So starting from self awareness, and that is right. person's understanding of self, or her values and goals. So someone, who is highly self-aware, knows, where that person is headed and why. So it's kind of very, very important to have that self-awareness. So if you are a person who lacks self-awareness, then you end up sometimes making decisions that can later on lead to great amount of inner turmoil, stress. And for example, you may get an offer to join a particular institution or a particular law firm because the money was great, but then you realize that you knew that the institution actually operated in a very different way from what your own personal values may have been, and then that will be lead to a problem where you say, oh gosh, I signed up, the money was good, but gosh, this is something that I can't really live with. Or you may go into a situation where you say, oh my god, I'm constantly bored. So be aware, self-aware of what you are, what you want to do, where you want to head. The second is a self-regulation, and that is, controlling and controlling your disruptive moods and impulses and so on. It's just so important for a professional. It's a highly important skill, and and highly useful when the environment is of change and uncertainty. And we all, as we know that life, the only constant thing is change. Everything changes. The life is full of changes and ambiguities and uncertainties. So when you are able to have self-regulation and you can master your emotions, you can actually manage all these changes very well. And so, what is it that shows that you have some self-regulation? You have the propensity of reflection, self-reflection, thoughtfulness, and you are, also comfortable with dealing with uncertainty and change. And then, an inbuilt, I call it the inbuilt ability to say no to impulsive urges that all of us, face from time to time. Motivation is the third piece that's important, because when you sort of you develop this idea of relishing achievement just for its own sake. So motivated people achieve much beyond their expectations. And in a motivational person, also there are certain traits that's for, passion for work itself. Such people do go and seek out, challenges. They love to learn. They will generally take great pride in a job well done. And then, of course, the that unflagging energy and desire to better. So in a way that, when you, and these are the kind of people who will actually challenge conventions. They would question why are things done in a certain way and why not in any other way. So they are usually, typically, people who are motivated are the ones who are eager to explore new approaches and to their work. Then you have empathy, and that's understanding other people's emotional makeup. And I feel that really, as professionals, this is probably the most important one in a way, and that is really thoughtfully that you consider what others' feelings are about what you do or what you do with them or what you do to them, and that helps you in making intelligent decisions, because in a way, during our lives, you could remember when you look at your college or you look at your law school or your friends, and you will immediately feel when there was an empathy of a sensitive teacher or a friend. And certainly you are, you can, we all are stuck by its absence in an unfeeling teacher or a senior or a friend. And you might think that, gosh, I mean, here is a crusty old lawyer, and why is he talking about empathy and all that? It just kind of feels so out of place, in the rough and tumble of the profession and the practice. But I think that empathy is important, and it's very important when you're looking at when working in a law firm environment or an in-house counsel, because the reason for that is that we all work in teams, whether it's a law firm or it's in-house, for example, and in that collaborating and cohesive relationships, they are really truly the ingredients. That's what makes you successful. And you have to trust others, and trust and empathy are two sides of the same coin. Then you also can have cultural differences, and if you have empathy, if you have understanding of others, you are able to bridge those cultural differences. And if you are working, for example, in an international setting, and globalization brings that all the time. It's a hugely important skill, that when you have empathy and you can understand other people, where they are coming from and how they feel about things. And then, of course, social skills and value of relationships. I have felt that, really establishing and maintaining relationships, building networks, building rapport, it's multidimensional in some way, because have you have self-awareness playing in, you have self-regulation, of course, empathy and communication skills, and so on and so forth, which bring this about. But a person who's skilled in establishing and maintaining relationships, can really achieve a lot. And I need to just let just give me a minute, and I'll quote you something interesting from David Meister. Let me just see. Yeah. So here it is. I have it here with me. He wrote. David Meister has written a huge lot on management of professional firms, and he wrote an essay, in 2005, advice to a young professional. And this was summed up very brilliantly. And he says, logic and rationality only take you so far. The most important thing you can learn is how to interact with other people. Everything you will ever want in your professional life and outside of it will come from another person: a client, a colleague, a superior, or a subordinate. Now, business lawyers, particularly corporate lawyers, and where they operate in an environment, where a large part involves interacting with others. So it's very, very important. And the interesting thing is that higher you go up the food chain, the more your dependence becomes on relationships. The more your success depends on success of your associates, your partners, and those who are working with you. And your success is dependent on how you influence the clients. So relationships is very, 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 very important, how you do it. And then there is the next behavioral thing is, and this is something that you will really learn when you get into actual practice of law. But for lawyers, I think it's a very important skill, and that's the skill of client development and client retention. So I don't want to talk too much about that, because that is something which is really truly, of all these that I've described to you, that this particular one is something that you really learn when you are actually in the practice of law, and then you imbibe stuff that you see from your seniors, and you sit into meetings and you understand how all the world goes around, and then you learn that. Now I want to come to the last two, which I have put as a skill, frankly, for me, and I think you need to have this skill and this competency, if I can call it, and that understanding of the professional and personal values. And the first one I really talks is ethics of a noble profession. And this goes beyond the ethics rules of the Bar Council of India. Those are statutory. But as lawyers, as professionals, we have to ourselves, to our clients, and to the profession, we owe somewhat of a higher level, self-imposed rules. And I call them, in my mind, if you look at something and say, well, should I or my client be doing this or not? And I call it the ethical action test. And that kind of goes through asking yourself these 5 questions. First, is it legal? Second, will I feel comfortable and guilt free if I do it? And then you say, well, does it match my personal honesty and integrity values and standards. Next, would I do it to my family or friends? And would I be perfectly okay if someone did that to me? Now, in other words, and for us as business lawyers, we have yet another interesting test. We say as well, would we like this to be reported on the front page of the national newspaper and to be read by my family and my friends? And we also need to realize that, legal profession is a very small world and the lawyer's reputation precedes her. And our most important asset are our reputation. And now I come to the last thing, which is important, and that's a lawyer's role in the society. You know, I mean, all of us, we joined the legal profession, and I'll be very happy, when we talk later on and there are questions around it. We joined the legal profession with for different reasons, ranging from family tradition to influence of role models, and then some of us want to make a ton of money. Some of us want to do some great social good, human rights and so on and so forth. And some of us come in, for no reason at all because there wasn't anything else to do. And and that's where you start. But then you come in into the profession, and then you kind of figure out that why am I here? What is it that I'm doing? Do I have any significant personal personal goals, a personal purpose which is higher than me? And we do know that lawyers, we have to earn a living, and a decent living. But then, how do we measure success? Is it economic or otherwise? And are professional values distinct from being a highly successful lawyer? So, in the sense that there is a common thread, I mean, the erosion in professional standards and conduct, sort of declining commitment to working for the public good, and so on. You can see there is so much of cynicism about the profession, demonstrated by various things, leaving aside just, lawyer jokes and otherwise. And I actually have questioned sort of this to myself, a lot, to say that, just look at our standing as a profession. And as you get into the profession, you will realize that, let's look at everyday situations. Today, believe you me, a lawyer is generally not an acceptable tenant for a common landlord. Believe it or not, we are deemed as troublemakers. We are not deemed as healers. We are, there has been a unwritten policy for several of banks of not issuing credit cards to lawyers. Do you know that? Not to my mind. That's, I mean, I wonder that, our higher obligations and values of the profession, as far as I'm concerned, and our role in the society. And in the past, I mean, lawyers were at the forefront of social change, and you can look at movements all around the world. And I think what we do as lawyers is a matter of sort of great consequence, and this our role is something that we need to learn. We need to understand, even when we are studying law, as to what is it that's expected of me when I'm getting this legal education. What for is it? What will I do with it? So, I mean, if you come to think of it, as I just mentioned, I mean, do look back and see, not only in India, everywhere else, the greatest leaders of our times, whether it's independence movements and social change and so on, always were from the legal profession. So we really, therefore, in terms of really looking for those higher values of the profession, whether it's striving to promote justice and fairness and morality and so on and so forth, that is something that we must understand and learn, as we step into the profession. And, they keep on saying it's the second oldest profession in the world, but, there is still a lot that we as a profession, can contribute to the society in so many different ways. And that's something that we must be very conscious of as we step into the profession of law. So with that, I think I was hoping to do only about 35 minutes, but I think I've ended up with about 45 minutes. So I will stop here.
Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us with your thought provoking words. I think Tanish is facing some network issues. So, if you permit, so can we move on to question answer session now?
Yeah, sure.
I would request all the attendees to post their questions in the chat box. So, first question is sent to us by Sayam Jha. One of the main advantages of the 5-year BA LLB course is that students can study various art subjects such as economics, sociology, history, along with law subjects. While knowledge over these subjects might help an academic, do you think it offers any competitive edge for lawyers in practice?
Now, uh, this is a very, you guys are all doing a 5-year program. I don't want to provoke you, and I don't want to get into a debate with you. But I have sometimes really questioned that whether 3+3 was a better format than 5 years. To be honest, I have even in the firm, and we have had very interesting internal debates on this as well. And there are, of course, as in every situation in this world which humans face, there are pros and cons of every situation. So personally, well, don't hold it against me, guys. I mean, I'm happy with the 5-year program. But I personally thought that the 3+3 works actually better because I think a good liberal arts program of 3 solid years, gives you better perspective. I think it broadens your horizons in a different way. And then you go into deeper study of law for 3 years, which is just solid law and nothing else. You got your background, you got your thing. So it in a way, what the question embedded in the question actually is almost which says, you know, why don't I just simply do law for those 5 years? And I think that will be a bad idea because you need to know about the world. Yeah, a lot more than just simply understanding what the contract law is. So I personally think that a liberal education is very important is an important foundation for study of law. So the fact that you are able to study other subjects, I think you must. As I said, my thought might be a bit more revolutionary because, after all, many stalwarts in the profession worked for many years, and academics know more about it, and they came up with a 5-year program. So there must be something good to it. But therefore, studying other things is important. You just can't simply be, in that frog in that well of the law and not understanding what's out there in the oceans of learning in other subjects. So you must, I think it's important to learn about other things in life, other subjects in life than just simply saying law. That's the only thing you want to learn.
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. We have Nakul Singh with us, and he would like to ask a question to you himself. Over to you, Nakul.
Sir, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. So just introduce yourself, please. Which year you are from?
Sir, I'm from the third year, sir, so I'm a member of IDG itself.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So I have two questions. So the first is that what is the relevance and importance of having publications in one's CV when one sits for the recruitment process? So that's one, sir. And the second is
Sorry, I didn't get the question. What did you say?
so the first is what is the relevance and importance of having publications in one's CV when one sits for a recruitment process? So that's my first question. Did you get it, sir? Or do you want me to?
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Okay, so that's my
Okay,
first
carry on.
question. So, and then the second is that, sir, after one has undergone or attempted online examinations and online classes for about 2 years, so if at all there are any adverse impacts on the employability or the value of that individual in the job market, so are there any ways to overcome that, if at all there are any adverse impacts as such?
Okay, so let's just deal first with the first. I think a couple of things. Uh, why publications might be important. Personally, when I was in this process of actually looking at new hires and so on and so forth, I would very keenly read anybody's publication which came along with the CV, really for two things. And again, it's sort of one is the just to see the approach, the analytical ability of the candidate, and secondly, of course, the writing skills. So I think to some extent they are important, because they do give some indication of the person's caliber. Now, the second piece actually is, honestly, I think we do not know the answer as yet, and because we are still in a way, uh, struggling with this entire what has happened over the last 20 months almost now, as to what it has meant. I mean, of course, in terms of client servicing and all, there were some interesting new methods found to service clients, and we had people, all around the country who moved to their hometowns and so on, and things in some strange ways worked better than I had thought that they would ever work. Now, including, I don't know, you guys need to tell me because some of you have been through, online internships. And I would really wonder about that, because one of the key things of internships actually is to get that that feeling of being in a law firm. As I call it, the smell of the place, and how lawyers are interacting, and the buzz, and you sit around a lunch table, and you can see seniors discuss things, and you can participate in some of those discussions, and that face to face interaction. So I think that probably would be a bit of a handicap when you have internship like that versus internship, which is kind of a face to face in the physical world. But in terms of saying that whether, I mean, the point is that it's not that for these 2 years, and maybe the third year, this coming year could be the same year where you may have, online exams. So it's not that, all the graduates from around the world will disappear for these 3 years. I mean, they will be very much there because everybody is equally placed. So in that sense, and people will do their hirings, and people will go about. So I mean, I don't have a choice to say no, no. I am not going to take any folks who are from the batch of 20, 21, and 22. I mean, people have already been hired. And law firms are continuing to hire even now. They are doing their campus things and also forth. So I think that is something which it cannot be ignored. It's not that you're going to say, okay, these 3 years and these 3 years, these batches don't exist. They pretty much exist, and they will find their way. Yes, they would have some experiences which have been different from the experiences of the earlier batches, but then that's we just talked about change and just about circumstances and uncertainties, and we got to deal with them the best way that we can. And be assured that everybody else is in the same in the same boat as you are. So it's not that you are unequally placed with anyone else.
Thank you so much, sir. Trishti is asking, given that it is the general view of the legal fraternity that hybrid mode of case hearing is here to stay, how do you think young lawyers are going to get affected by it, and how should they prepare themselves to excel in it?
All right. So first of all, I think I think the hybrid mode actually may have been one of the good things which has come out of this. And if it can be developed further at the different levels of courts, because what has happened is that whilst in the higher courts, certainly at the Supreme Court and the high courts, and most of the tribunals like the companies law tribunal or many of the regulatory tribunals, where the litigation already was certain at a certain sophisticated level, the conversion into the hybrid mode and the beginning completely online mode was somewhat easier. But it has been a hard time at several of the Mufassil courts, lower courts, when you go into deep interiors, you go into provincial towns and so on, where neither the lawyers nor the courts were equipped with this. So there has been a lot of problem in those courts. In fact, many of our brother lawyers have gone through very hard times because there were no physical hearings and so on. So that's a interesting. This is a larger problem that hopefully will get resolved. But looking at it going forward on the basis that you could actually have hybrid mode, so I think then what will happen obviously is, because that, coming back to the same thing that I was talking about, feel of the place, smell of the place. And that's where the interesting thing is, that when you are in a physical court, and you actually have the other side there, and everybody is in that court, and there's a judge sitting in front of you, and all that is happening in real time, real life, and you are right there. So there is certainly a certain level of learning there. And I would say that if it is going into the hybrid mode, then you have to make sure that you do get your opportunities, that in that hybrid mode, that you do turn up once in a while in a physical court, just to get that feel as to what it is. How do you see the nuances, the body language of a judge, and things, a frown or a wave that of hand that you cannot probably sometimes see in a virtual hearing. So it's an interesting thing to be in a court. So I would say that you will have to look for, and obviously your seniors that you work with will be giving you those opportunities of attending those hybrid hearings. So when they go for a physical hearing, you tag along, and then again you have to uh, uh, you know uh, you have to kind of adapt to that situation. And as I said, these are things that we have never faced, and we are facing them for the first time, and we'll have to see what the impacts of these are, and are there any long-term impacts at all. If yes, what are those impacts? And some of those impacts could be good impacts, for all that people have actually learned so well to handle virtual hearings, that the old dogs like us did not learn new tricks. But the young people who are adapt with technology can take to it much better way than we could. So there could be some pluses, for all for young people who can adapt to these things better than the older generation can. So what I'm seeing is, see the bright side of it as well.
Thank you so much, sir. Next question will be asked to you by Samarth Sansar. He is a member of IDG.
Good evening, sir. So I'm Samarth, and I'm currently in my fourth year. So my question is regarding how do you see the debate around the problematic work culture in the legal profession in general? More so, this issue has been discussed during the pandemic, and people have said that it has affected their work-life balance. So, what would be your advice for uh, like students who would be joining the legal profession to strike an effective balance?
Okay, so let's first look at, you use the expression work-life balance. And I personally have a problem with that expression. And the problem is that work is part of life. It's not that there is work and there is life. Work is part of life. So I am promoting a different expression, and I call it balanced life. So I kind of mentioned that earlier on, when we spoke about relationships and so on and other things. The thing here is that there is, I think some of it is hype. I mean, I know, and I don't have to take names here, but I know of law firms, and I do know of individual lawyers who would say, "Oh gosh, you are not in the office at 2 a.m. I mean, are you serious about practice of law?" So there is, sometimes this becomes a cultural issue, it becomes a habit issue. You have law firms where young people hang out until 9 p.m. at night when it was a physical world, because the person who has to approve their drafts is too busy in other things. And you are not really managing, the person on the top is not managing his or her time properly. And it is discourteous for a young lawyer to leave before the senior has left. So there are lots of conventions that have been built around as well, which cause this unnecessary, in my view, an unnecessary stress. So you don't have to have stress to be successful. That's one of the wrong notions that we have. So I would say that really, you have to find balance in the way you conduct yourself as a professional. And that's where it comes important to figure out what is valuable to you, how you prioritize your time, how do you, what is of what is it that you're looking for in life? What is the larger purpose? So I think all those play into your determining what is the balance in life that you want. Because you surely people these days have other passions, they have hobbies, they have other things that they are very good at, which they will like to pursue, whether it is playing music, or whether it is doing something else, or going for your annual hiking trips, or wherever. And it is therefore up to you to be self-aware, as I mentioned, to see what is important to you. So when you're going to make a choice of your career, where you want to do, what kind of work you want to do, be prepared. Be prepared for what kind of life you want to lead. What kind of life do you want to lead? So if you're better aware, of what it is that you are looking for, and I mean, I keep on saying this to say that, it's so important. It is so important. So, questions like, how do you manage your work and your life? Do you live to work or work to live? Does that matter to you? And why does that matter to you? How do you see your relationships within your own family and at work? Are you spending enough time with the people you love? How healthy is your lifestyle? Do you believe that money buys happiness? So are you one of those people who is more worried about what I call the quantity of having versus the quality of being? Does service to others matter to you? So who you are, why you are here, and what you see as the primary purpose of your life, those are the sacred aspects. You see, what happens is that we just go into this rut. So if you start asking those questions to yourself, you will find balanced life. You will find that. Now, you may think that I'm talking about mushy thing I'm supposed to be a crusty old lawyer telling you, no, work hard, God damn it, kill it. You only have to practice law, only then you can succeed. I just don't belong to that school. I don't believe in it, personally or otherwise. But I think there is so much more to life than simply saying, well, this is what I want. I want 3 apartments and 2 Mercedes cars by the time I'm 35. Now, you can set those kind of goals for yourself, and then you will not find balance in life. Then you'll kill yourself for getting more of the stuff. But you may not have happiness, and you may not have contentment. You will satisfy your other needs, but you will not satisfy your soul. And I did realize some of these things later in life, and I wish I knew some of it earlier on, that I was wiser, and I understood life a little better. So I encourage all of you to get a better handle on life, understand life a little bit more better. So, I mean, some of it may sound altruistic or eclectic, but try and build that dimension into your lives, and I can promise you, you will feel that you are leading a balanced life.
Thank you so much, sir. Arya Kant is asking, so you talked about establishing relationships and talked about leading teams and projects. I wanted to know what are some other essential skills needed to lead a leading established law firm in India, according to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, you're asking a very deeper question on saying, what is leadership and what are attributes of leadership and so on and so forth. I mean, that's a subject on which, we can have a day-long seminar and still not get to the bottom of it. So, when you talk of leadership, and obviously, there are various skills, and particularly when you are leading a law firm. And I find that Again, it is altruistic to some extent, but one part of leadership actually is that when you have you heard of Simon Sinek? Have any one of you heard of Simon Sinek, who writes those very interesting, inspirational other books? He's a great. Listen to him on TED Talks and so on, and listen to his books. His There is a book that he's written which says leaders eat last. Okay, so one of the things that you say, what you need to do is that you have to think of the institution and think of the others before you think of it yourself. Before you think of your self-interest comes literally at the end. So it's again, honestly, leadership is all about managing relationships. Successful leaders are those who maintain fantastic relationships. Because the brilliant part of it is that as you go up, your success actually depends more and more on other people. So let's take completely in a commercial world. So do you think that the managing director of TCS does every project himself or herself? The success of the managing director of TCS really depends on how good a leader he is or she is, how he or she manages that entire group underneath, which in turn are leaders themselves. Okay, so it's a question of trying to work a shared vision that you want to do for the institution. It's a question of setting up the values that you want the institution to pursue. And then you actually motivate people that they are all on that platform with that shared vision, working towards the same goal. That's what leadership is all about. So motivating others, leading by example, walking the talk. That's what a leader does. So if I'm going to ask everyone to say that filling in timesheets is important, I must be doing it myself. So we can have a sitting one day and we can talk about leadership, because that, as I said, is a consuming thing. We can do a day-long seminar on leadership.
Thank you so much, sir. We have Abin Alex with us, and he would like to ask you a question himself.
Good evening, sir. I'm Evan Thomas Alex. I'm from the final year, first year. So, sir, I wanted to ask about a certain something. So, you know that the Bar Council of India mandates certain weeks of internship before enrolling to the bar, right? But usually, what happens is that as law students, we have 4 or maybe even 6 weeks of internship during every vacation. That's what happens. And usually a lot of us felt that this time is not enough, because from my experience, I would at least take 2 weeks to get familiar with the office and everything, and I have 2 weeks left to learn the nuances of the law, uh, nuances of the activities that are happening there. So do you think this 4 week or 6 week internship is sufficient for a student to actually understand the nuances of this profession, uh, or would you recommend a longer mandatory internship period? Like, for example, for MBBS students, there's a 1 year mandatory internship which is called house urgency, and only after that can they move, uh, can they do a PG course. That's how medical students does it. So, would you suggest something similar for law students?
Well, you know what happened, as you know, the Bar Council had come up with those rules a few years back, that after you finish your law, then 1 year you are sort of under training and you have to fill in that diary and you have to do this, that, and the other. And it was quite strange and funny because it did not think of corporate lawyers at all. So yes, I mean I almost felt when I was telling you about my own situation that it was unfair almost. As far as my own situation was crazy, because I had 3 years of full-time internship and 3 years of college education at the same time. So frankly, when I finished my third year of law, I mean, I felt that I'd been practicing law for 3 years. So obviously, longer periods of actual working that you have, but I'm just wondering that, there could be other things that can also be done. If you can't extend the duration, then can it be made more productive? I mean, can we have more structured internship programs that can be organized in terms of what do you actually do in that period? Can there could be a little bit of kind of I won't say curriculum, but a little bit of a methodology around the internship, and a minimum thing that must be offered, because I know that when those are pressure times, and even law firms get pressured, and I have seen internship periods of as short as three weeks and 2 weeks and so on. And so you're right to that extent that, to get the flavor. After all, the purpose of internship really is for people, young, budding future lawyers, to come into the actual workplace, into the actual work environment, get the feel of how things are done, and even, like being a fly on the wall, even sort of sitting into the meetings and seeing how meetings are conducted, how matters are done, tagging along to see in the court what happens in a court. So really getting that experience of how things are actually done. So obviously, the longer you get that experience, the more enriching it is. But then comes the question that how long that should be. Now it also is a qualitative question. Not only the length of it. I mean, if you're sitting around and you say I'm on internship for 8 weeks, and 4 weeks out of that you're sitting around doing nothing, so that's no good either. So I think it has to be some way of managing the both the quantity and the quality. And for example, I don't know what the situation in NUJS is, but most of the law schools really don't have a structured internship program. They have obviously structured program for placement and so on, but there's no structured internship program, because I remember we struggled for years, because JSA had set up certain standards to say we want people with this percentile to even for internship, because at one point in time the main hiring stream in JSA was people who had done repetitive internships with us, and we found that as a very useful stream, and that was traditionally the reason why for many years JSA never turned up at law schools, because internships was a major stream of in for us stream in for people who are joining us. But we never got down to actually setting up proper internship programs at the law school level itself, where you can actually have a way of some kind of a system where the kind of internship you want to do, you can go to that place. I know that you normally try and do an NGO, then you go to a court going lawyer, and then you go to a law firm, or you go to a geography and so on. But it still is, I guess, largely left to the students themselves. So if internship is to be, I think it should be made a more important part of the curriculum itself, and more organized. And then there should be some requirements, that if law firms are taking people in, then there should be some deliverables. There should be some minimum, standards or something that can be established. So that's my immediate reaction to that, because it's not only just the length, but also the quality which matters.
Thank you so much, sir. We have Tanish Arora, one of the co-conveners of IDG, and he will be taking ahead the session.
Thank you, Aditi. Sir, am I audible to you?
Yes, you are.
I'm very sorry, sir. I had internet connection issues lately, so I could not join earlier. Sir, the next question has been put by Brunal, and she wants to ask you, how do we go about developing our soft skills?
Okay. So, uh, first of all, I think the important thing is to have the awareness that that soft skills are important, and then in a sense that how do you go about doing it, is really less. For example, if you were to talk about, let's say, social skills, uh, uh, you know various different ways, uh, uh, I mean, I can really, let's just pick up one thing, for example. Let's talk about emotional intelligence in some ways. Okay. Now, I have personally believed that there should actually be a credits program in a law school for emotional intelligence because it's just so critically important for you as a lawyer. Now, you don't have that as a credits program, right? Yes or no? There's nothing known as emotional intelligence program whereby you can actually improve your emotional quotient or your EQ, right? So what would you do? I would say, for instance, pick up a David Goldman book. Start reading about emotional intelligence. Start reading about what it actually means. And I'm talking about a thing when you don't actually have a program, you don't have a coach, you don't have the ability of having a coach, because typically uh, it's very interesting. All of us are differently equipped, even in our emotional intelligence. And typically, you would do kind of literally a benchmarking. A coach can actually benchmark and sit with you and do a little analysis and figure out where you are, and actually do a gap analysis and say these things you are very good at, but these are the things, these attributes are even unknown to yourself. And you actually have a benchmarking of saying these are the areas where I'm deficient, these are the areas where I'm good, and these are the areas where I'm really terrible. So you actually learn the areas where you need to work on, and then you will have to, because you don't have any academic there's nobody in your faculty who will be able to teach you. So you need to have self-help, which means read books, go to TED Talks. You will find an amazing variety of fantastic speakers who will be talking about relationships. Who will be speaking about empathy, how to develop some of these qualities in yourself. Look at Simon Sinek, Simon and Sinek, and you have enormous amount of reading materials available as to how you can work on yourself, to improve yourself, to improve your skills. So I would encourage you to do more of the self-help studies there. And when I was identifying those gaps, that's what I keep on saying, mind the gap. That emotional intelligence is so important in your work as you come out, the day you come out. And I was explaining to you the classic problem that this youngster faced, who was having a problem with a client on the other end who was screaming. Or you have a very angry partner, you failed on a timeline. But just imagine, I mean, if you are emotionally equipped to handle those situations, you would be far less stressed. You'll be able to perform better. Now, these are things, some of these things, some people are very good at it. They are naturally, stress-free people. They can, they can take stress better than some others can. I mean, that's us, we all human beings, we don't come out of the same mold. So you have to figure out what you are good at in all of these soft skills. Even, for example, like writing skills or presentation skills are also soft skills in a way. And you work upon that. So, there is a tremendous amount of reading material available for young law students on better legal writing. So if you don't have legal writing as a part of your course, enough material available. Go to websites like Clarity, Plain Language, and you'll start picking up tips. So it's a question of how you're going to do some of this self-help, because that's the gap that you have in your curriculum. I wish emotional intelligence was part of the curriculum as a credits program, and you actually had a clinical psychologist and an NLP trainer who came in and you talked about this and actually assessed people and said, these are the areas where you need to do work, to give you more work, to put you in groups to do some group studies, and we do that in our law firm because a lot of us have never understood this. And even at equity partner level, we have coaching now, and we have emotional intelligence assessment. When we've been in the practice of law for 30 and 35 and 40 years, just imagine if we knew about these things earlier on, how much more we could have accomplished. So what I'm telling you is from a lot of it is from personal experience. So has self-help, learn those things. There is enough material. You are today in a world which is over full of material. In fact, you'll have a problem if you go today and even simple Google something on emotional intelligence and say, I want to read some articles on self-awareness. You'll get hundreds of articles. But I would say start simply with David Goldman's path-breaking book on emotional intelligence. So you at least start familiarizing yourself with concepts. And then you will certainly, as you read through, you will start applying some of those things to yourself and say, yeah, okay, now I understand this. Now I know why I react in a certain way at a certain time. And you certainly start becoming more self-aware. You see, they say the 3 A's, no? Awareness, acceptance, and then action. That's pretty much part of your self-learning as well. You first become aware, then you accept, yeah, there is a problem here, and then you do some action to solve that problem. Folks, I will have to I'll have to sign off in another about couple of minutes, so I can take maybe one more question. I'm sorry about that.
Yes,
I
sir.
have another commitment.
All right, sir. So, sir, we have Anirudh with us. He would like to ask his question to you directly.
Thank you, sir. My name is Anirudh, and I'm from the final year. And I wanted to ask you how important is an LLM if you want to practice law? Like for entering the academia, we all know that doing an LLM really helps you. But if you want to practice law in the corporate field or in the litigation field, does an LLM help in that case?
Okay, so let's put it differently. When during my time, LLM was considered purely an academic kind of a qualification. People who wanted to really go into research or academic or teach law, they normally did LLM those days. But over the years, things have changed. And one of the things that's sort of bringing LLM in this perspective is this entire thing about specialization. When we did law, really there was nothing known as specialization. I mean, frankly, when I started my practice of law, believe it or not, in the morning I would go to the Tisari courts, helping my senior, on a divorce matter, and in the afternoon I'll come back into the office and I'll be writing a technical collaboration agreement. You did everything, whatever came your way, you did it. There was nothing known as specialization. And now we are in a situation where you're looking at hyper specialization. So not only it is corporate, and within that M&A and private equity, and then you have in the finance, you have project finance, and you have structured products, and you have this and you have that, and you have all kinds of regulation, and and antitrust, and you have telecom law, and you have a telecom regulator. None of that existed at that time. All this is an invention of the last 30 years. So specialization move has come, and that's where people are sort of tending not only to specialize, and they want to sort of have a little bit of a degree which says, well, this person specialized in telecom law, just as an example, or this person did this, and has an extra degree in this. And typically in my IP firm, for example, LLM, with focus in IP, obviously becomes sometimes the most important hiring criteria, because it's a boutique practice, and you want to have people with IP law. Now, so in terms of, therefore, it's a kind of a credential of specialization if you are wanting to specialize in something. But let me just see from my experience as to, is it a good idea to go and straight away do your LLMs after your LLB? I don't know. I particularly felt that And you will see that when you go into an LLM program, and certainly when you go into an LLM program overseas, which are quite expensive, as you know, uh, you will find that most of your classmates will be people who have done 2, 3, 4 years of practice of law, and then they have come into the LLM program. Now, the advantage of that, actually, in an interesting way, is that first, that you have actually gone into practice of law, you kind of look at the various areas of law that actually interest you, practiced a bit of it, and then felt comfortable to say, this is where I want to do. So you make a very much more of an informed choice to say, this is the area of practice that I want to now focus in and on specialize. And the second thing, of course, is that more, and I would say people who are getting into law firms and all that, that you actually established a fantastic network, at that level. And I know of people who sort of maintain these relationships with their LLM colleagues forever, and so you expand your network. So I think you have to be very clear when you want to make an LLM choice. I mean, clearly people want to go into academics, those who are going into specific areas like human rights and international law and so on, then they have to go ahead and do LLM, strictly as a part of their overall completion of education. Not only that, they'll probably go ahead and do a PhD after that because they were never intending to get into practice. But you want to get into practice of law and you want to specialize, then you have to figure out that what you want to specialize. And I'm asking the question, how do you know what you're going to specialize when you haven't even practiced that law? You haven't even really tested your aptitude on a day-to-day basis to say, this really works for me. Oh, I love it. This is my passion, and I like to learn more about it, and I want to be known as a great lawyer in this space. So I mean, I feel so, there is this, again, as I said, there's this entire pro and con of the situation, but timing when you want to go and do LLM is another consideration that you should think of.
Thank you so much for answering that question, sir. So, if it is okay with you, at this note, I would like to invite Pratyush Nigam to quickly deliver a vote of thanks.
A very good evening, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the informal discussion group, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you for introducing us with the various intricacies of competencies and skilling that is required for the practice of law. It was indeed a privilege for us to have hosted you, sir, and I am sure that each and every one of us is taking something valuable from this insightful session. I would also like to thank the faculty members and other attendees who have graced us with their presence today and for asking such pertinent questions.